They tell you to just move on because it wasn't real love. After all, how can you grieve someone who was never truly yours? Society whispers that unrequited feelings are merely infatuation, a fleeting delusion that rational minds should easily dismiss. This collective voice insists that genuine heartbreak requires reciprocated love, shared moments, and tangible memories to justify the depth of your pain. Yet here you stand, feeling as though your very soul has been torn asunder by someone who existed more in the realm of possibility than reality. But what if this conventional wisdom has it entirely backwards? What if the love you feel for someone who was never yours is not lesser, but perhaps the purest form of human connection, untainted by possession, expectation, or the inevitable disappointments of reality? Carl Jung understood that the psyche does not distinguish between what society deems real and what lives in the sacred space of our inner world. The soul that screams for unlived love is not delusional. It is responding to something far more profound than mere romantic fantasy. This anguish emerges from the depths where archetypes dwell, where the eternal figures of the beloved, the anima and the shadow dance in perpetual motion. Jung would say that you are not mourning a person, but rather confronting the collision between your inner divine feminine or masculine and the finite reality of human limitation. When you love someone who remains forever beyond reach, you are touching something sacred and terrible within yourself. This is not the shallow pain of rejection, but the profound ache of recognizing your own capacity for transcendent love, whilst simultaneously facing the brutal truth that not all love is meant to be possessed or consumed. Your heart breaks not because you have lost someone, but because you have discovered the infinite nature of your own loving, whilst dwelling in a finite world. Do you recognize this paradox within yourself? This simultaneous expansion and contraction, this feeling of having touched something divine whilst being reminded of your human limitations. The conventional world may not understand, but your soul knows the difference between superficial attraction and the recognition of something eternal within another being. This knowledge, though painful, is the beginning of a profound transformation that Jung called individuation, the journey towards becoming whole. Jung taught us that within every individual lies a constellation of archetypal figures, eternal patterns that shape our deepest experiences of love, longing, and loss. When you encounter someone who awakens this profound yearning, you are not simply meeting another person. You are witnessing the projection of your own inner beloved onto the external world. This figure represents the completion your psyche seeks, the missing piece that seems to make you whole when glimpsed in another. The anima, Jung's term for the feminine aspect within the masculine psyche, or the animus representing masculine qualities within the feminine soul, manifests through these impossible loves. These archetypal figures carry the promise of psychological completion, the sense that union with this particular being would somehow heal the fundamental split within your nature. Yet the very impossibility of such union serves a crucial purpose in the individuation process. Your beloved who remains forever out of reach becomes a mirror reflecting your own unlived potentials, your disowned qualities, your capacity for devotion and transcendence. Jung would observe that what you love in them is often what you have yet to recognize within yourself. The businessman drawn to the free-spirited artist, the pragmatist enchanted by the dreamer, the earthbound soul yearning for the ethereal being. Each sees in their impossible beloved the very qualities they must cultivate within themselves. This archetypal love serves as a bridge between the personal and the transpersonal, between your individual story and the collective human experience of longing for wholeness. The grief you feel is not merely personal loss, but participation in the universal human condition of seeking completion outside ourselves, whilst the true work lies within. Every poet, mystic, and lover throughout history has walked this path of loving someone who could never be possessed. The intensity of this experience often overwhelms, because it awakens regions of the psyche that lie dormant during ordinary love affairs. When love cannot be satisfied through possession or consumption, it transforms into something else entirely, a force of psychological and spiritual development that Jung recognized as essential to becoming fully human. Have you begun to sense that this pain might be serving a purpose beyond your understanding? Within the depths of unlived love lurks the shadow, that aspect of the psyche containing everything we have rejected, denied, or failed to integrate about ourselves. Jung understood that our most profound attractions often emerge from encountering our disowned qualities reflected in another being. The person you can never have frequently embodies characteristics that your conscious mind has deemed unacceptable, dangerous, or impossible to claim as your own. Perhaps you are drawn to their confidence because you have spent years diminishing your own power. Maybe their emotional freedom captivates you because you have locked your own feelings behind walls of propriety and fear. The unavailable beloved becomes a repository for all the unlived aspects of your personality, a walking embodiment of your rejected potentials. This projection creates an illusion of completion that feels more real than reality itself. The shadow aspect of this dynamic reveals itself in the intensity of your attachment to someone who remains beyond reach. Jung would suggest that this obsessive quality emerges not from genuine love, but from the psyche's desperate attempt to reclaim its disowned parts through fusion with another. The beloved becomes a drug that temporarily soothes the ache of self-abandonment, yet ultimately deepens the split between who you are and who you might become. This shadow projection explains why letting go feels impossible. You are not merely releasing a person, but confronting the terrifying prospect of abandoning parts of yourself that you have only ever glimpsed in their presence. The grief encompasses not only the loss of future possibilities with them, but the death of the version of yourself that existed only in their reflected light. Jung recognized that true healing requires withdrawing these projections and claiming these disowned qualities as your own. The darkness of this realization can feel overwhelming, that your deepest love might be, in part, a sophisticated form of self-abandonment. Yet within this shadow lies the key to transformation. When you can love in another what you refuse to cultivate within yourself, you are being shown the path to wholeness. Can you begin to see how this impossible love might be your psyche's way of demanding that you become everything you have projected onto them? Jung understood that significant psychological development often emerges from crisis, and the experience of loving someone you can never have frequently precipitates what he termed an individuation crisis. This is the moment when the old structures of your personality, your familiar ways of seeking love, validation, and completion, collapse under the weight of an impossible longing. You find yourself suspended between who you have been and who you might become. The crisis manifests as a profound disorientation, a sense that the world you thought you understood has revealed itself to be insufficient. Your usual strategies for finding happiness and love seem suddenly childish and inadequate when measured against the depth of what you feel for this unattainable person. Jung would recognize this as the necessary destruction that precedes rebirth, the ego's encounter with forces larger than its capacity to control or comprehend. During this phase, you may experience what mystics have called the dark night of the soul, a period of profound questioning where previous certainties crumble and new truths have yet to emerge. Your rational mind struggles to make sense of loving someone so completely, whilst knowing that union is impossible. This paradox cannot be resolved through logic. It can only be lived through with courage and faith in the transformative process itself. The individuation crisis demands that you develop a new relationship with love itself, one that is not dependent upon possession, reciprocation, or external validation. Jung taught that this crisis often serves as an initiation into mature love, forcing you to discover sources of wholeness and meaning that exist independently of romantic fulfillment. You are being asked to love without attachment, to remain open without expectation, to find completion within yourself whilst maintaining connection to others. This transformation rarely occurs without significant resistance from the ego, which has built its identity around strategies of acquisition and control. The thought of loving purely, without hope of return, challenges everything you have believed about what love should provide. Yet Jung understood that this crisis, though painful, represents your psyche's attempt to evolve beyond the limitations of possessive love into something far more profound and sustainable. Are you willing to let this crisis transform you rather than simply endure it? Jung was deeply influenced by alchemical traditions that understood transformation as a process of turning base metals into gold through carefully orchestrated stages of dissolution and reconstruction. The experience of loving someone you can never have follows a similar alchemical process, where the raw material of your longing is gradually transformed into something infinitely more valuable than romantic fulfillment could ever provide. The initial stage, which alchemists called the nigredo or blackening, corresponds to the dissolution of your previous understanding of love and identity. Everything you believed about relationships, happiness, and your own worth seems to dissolve in the acid of impossible longing. This stage feels like death because, in psychological terms, it is the death of the ego's belief that external love can provide lasting fulfillment. Following the darkness comes what Jung termed the albedo or whitening phase, where clarity begins to emerge from confusion. You start to recognize patterns in your attraction to unavailable people, understanding how these relationships serve as mirrors reflecting unlived aspects of your own nature. This growing awareness feels simultaneously liberating and terrifying, as you realize that the love you sought outside yourself was always meant to be cultivated within. The final stage, the rubedo or reddening, represents the integration of this hard-won wisdom into a new way of being. You discover that the capacity for profound love that drew you to this impossible person was never dependent upon their reciprocation. It was always your capacity, your gift, your responsibility to nurture. Jung would say that you have reclaimed your projected anima or animus, integrating these archetypal energies into conscious personality. Through this alchemical process, what began as devastating heartbreak transforms into something resembling what the mystics called unconditional love. Love that exists for its own sake, rather than for what it might receive in return. This transformation does not diminish your capacity for human relationship. Rather, it provides a foundation of inner wholeness that makes authentic intimacy possible. Can you sense this alchemical process working within your own experience, turning the lead of your longing into something precious and enduring? As the alchemical transformation reaches completion, something unprecedented emerges from the ashes of your former self, a quality of being that Jung associated with true psychological maturity. You discover that your capacity to love deeply without attachment, to remain open without expectation, has forged within you a kind of authentic power that cannot be taken away by external circumstances or other people's choices. This power does not arise from closing your heart or developing cynical detachment, but rather from learning to love so purely that the outcome becomes secondary to the act itself. You realize that your ability to experience profound connection was never dependent upon reciprocation. It was always entirely yours to give or withhold. This recognition shifts the entire foundation upon which you build relationships and understand your own worth. Jung understood that individuals who have integrated this lesson often become somewhat dangerous to systems built upon emotional manipulation and codependency. When you no longer need someone else's love to feel complete, you cannot be controlled through threats of abandonment or promises of affection. Your very presence challenges others to examine their own relationship with authentic versus possessive love. The person who has transformed impossible longing into integrated wholeness often discovers that they have become mysteriously attractive to others, not through desperation or manipulation, but through the magnetic quality of someone who loves freely without attachment. This paradox reveals itself repeatedly. The moment you stop needing love, you become infinitely more capable of both giving and receiving it authentically. This emergence of authentic power manifests in practical ways throughout your life. You find yourself making decisions based upon inner knowing rather than external validation. You choose relationships that genuinely nourish rather than those that simply fill emotional voids. Most importantly, you discover that the love you thought you needed from that impossible person was always available within yourself. You simply needed to learn how to access and trust it. Have you begun to recognize this shift occurring within your own experience of love and self-worth? Jung taught that our deepest wounds often serve as gateways to our greatest gifts, and the experience of loving someone who remains forever beyond reach frequently becomes what he might call a sacred wound, an injury that, rather than simply healing and disappearing, transforms into a source of profound wisdom and compassion. This wound teaches you truths about love that could never be learned through successful romantic relationships alone. Through this sacred wound, you develop an almost supernatural capacity for understanding others who struggle with impossible loves, unrequited feelings, and the profound loneliness that accompanies loving someone you cannot have. Your own journey through this darkness creates within you a quality of empathy and insight that becomes a gift to everyone who encounters your presence. Jung would recognize this as the wounded healer archetype emerging within your personality. The sacred wound also serves as a permanent reminder of love's true nature, that it exists independently of possession, reciprocation, or even the continued existence of its object. You carry within you the living proof that love transcends all external circumstances, that the capacity for profound connection emerges from your own depths, rather than from another person's ability to return your feelings. This knowledge becomes unshakable wisdom. Perhaps most importantly, this wound keeps your heart tender and accessible even as you develop strength and independence. You never forget the exquisite vulnerability of loving without guarantee, the courage required to remain open when closure seems impossible. This memory prevents the cynicism and emotional numbness that often accompanies those who have never risked loving someone completely unavailable. The transformation is complete when you can look back upon your impossible beloved with gratitude rather than regret, recognizing them as the unconscious agent of your own psychological and spiritual development. They served as the catalyst for your journey into authentic selfhood, the mirror that reflected your capacity for transcendent love, the teacher who showed you that wholeness must be cultivated from within. In loving them, you learned to love the eternal within yourself. In losing them, you found everything you never knew you possessed. Can you begin to sense the sacred nature of your own wound? Can you feel how this experience of loving someone you could never have might be transforming you into someone capable of loving more authentically than you ever imagined possible? You are not broken. You are becoming whole. You are not alone. You are awakening to the love that has always existed within your own depths, waiting to be claimed and celebrated. What emotions does this perspective awaken within you? Share your thoughts below, and let this community know how Jung's understanding of impossible love resonates with your own journey. If this exploration has touched something deep within your soul, consider subscribing for more profound insights into the psychology of love, loss, and transformation.